I can't protect people who don't know how to care, Mom. Mary sat across from him, folding her hands. When you were little, she said, you used to cry when you saw someone hurt, even cartoons. I remember thinking, this boy's heart is too soft for this world. He smiled, barely. But I was wrong, she added. That heart made you who you are. He looked at her, emotions swelling in his chest. They embarrassed you, hurt you. I've lived through worse. What matters is what you do with it. The clock ticked. Outside, the town moved on. But in that office, something shifted. A reckoning wasn't just punishment. It was responsibility. News of the incident spread like wildfire. The clip, hastily uploaded by a bystander who'd caught the tail end of the scene, went viral within hours. The headline was impossible to ignore. Officers laugh at elderly woman's fall. Captain reveals she's his mother. Within a day, it had been shared thousands of times, igniting fury across the internet. Local news vans parked outside the station, cameras ready. Anchors spoke in stern tones about the loss of public trust. Commentators demanded accountability, not just for the officers, but for the institution they represented. Michael watched it all unfold with a pit in his stomach. This wasn't the attention he wanted for his department. And yet, part of him knew. Maybe this is what it took. Inside the station, things had changed. The air was thick with self-consciousness. Officers walked with eyes lowered. Some were angry, not at what happened, but at being caught. Others were quiet, haunted by the memory of Mary's face. Officer Daniels hadn't returned since the suspension. Neither had a few others. Those who did return were tasked with retraining, undergoing sessions on empathy, ethics, and public trust. Michael brought in community leaders to speak. Nurses, social workers, school teachers, people who dealt with vulnerability every day and still chose compassion. Meanwhile, Mary stayed mostly out of sight. But she hadn't vanished. She volunteered, quietly, at the local community center, helping serve meals and organizing donations. When a young reporter tracked her down and asked how she felt about the scandal, her answer surprised everyone. I don't want revenge, she said, voice calm but firm. I want better policemen, not bitter ones. The quote went viral. Again. This time, people weren't just outraged. They were moved. Letters poured in, emails, messages from strangers, survivors of elder abuse, people whose parents had fallen through the cracks. People who saw Mary not as a symbol, but as their own mother, their own grandmother. Michael's inbox filled too. Some were angry, others were supportive, many were conflicted. But one message stood out. It came from a retired officer in another state. You reminded us why the badge exists. Thank you for standing tall when it mattered. Still, not all. Consequences were noble. Some of the fired officers struggled. Daniels spiraled into depression. Another moved to another city trying to escape the reputation. A few filed appeals. One afternoon, Michael visited Daniels. The man looked like a ghost of his former self. I wasn't trying to be cruel, he said quietly. I just didn't think. It felt like a joke. We joke about everything, Mike. You know that. Michael nodded. That's the problem. They sat in silence for a long time. You think people can change? Daniels finally asked. I think people can choose. And sometimes they don't get many chances to do it right. Daniels nodded, not convinced, but listening. Back at the station, change was slow but visible. The morning coffee gatherings were quieter now. The officers who remained had scars, but also resolve. Michael organized monthly town halls. He stood before angry citizens and didn't flinch. He admitted failures. He promised progress. And most importantly, He listened. He also began mentoring younger officers more directly, insisting that training went beyond tactics and procedures. It had to include heart, perspective, the ability to see others not as problems to manage, but as people to serve. Through it all, Mary watched, quietly proud, quietly hopeful. One evening she joined Michael at a town hall. He didn't expect it. But as she stood next to him, the audience rose, not in outrage, but in respect. She didn't say much. Just, "Thank you for hearing me. Now hear each other." And for the first time in a long while, the room didn't just listen. It understood. Months passed. Seasons turned. The frenzy around the viral video began to fade, but the lessons it unearthed did not. In that small town, change no longer felt abstract. It had faces, stories, and a mother's quiet endurance to keep it real. Captain Michael Monroe had not forgotten. Every morning he arrived early, unlocking the station himself. A new plaque had been mounted in the lobby, a quote from Mary etched in brass. "Kindness is not weakness, it is strength made visible." New recruits stood before it during their first briefing. They were told the story. Not the viral version, not the headline, but the full account. The moment empathy was forgotten, and the moment it was reclaimed. Michael revised the department's training protocols from the ground up. Officers were now evaluated not only on tactical performance, but on empathy, communication, and community. Trust. Ride-alongs with social workers were mandatory. Quarterly reflection sessions became part of the schedule. It was a lot. Some grumbled. But most adapted. Mary, meanwhile, found a second chapter she never expected. Her days at the community center expanded into speaking engagements. She stood before cadets, council members, and classrooms, telling her story, not with bitterness, but with quiet insistence that dignity should never be optional. "I'm not here to make you feel bad," she often said. "I'm here to remind you what you're capable of, at your best." Her voice became a kind of quiet anthem. One afternoon she visited the station again, cane in hand, but moving with a touch more steadiness than before. The officers greeted her respectfully, some even with hugs. She sat in on a de-escalation seminar, eyes gleaming with curiosity, occasionally offering a sharp, insightful question that made even the senior instructors pause. Michael watched from the back of the room, arms crossed, a faint smile on his lips. That evening, they sat together, on her porch sharing tea. "I didn't expect this," she said, gesturing to the folder in her lap, a collection of thank you letters, many from officers and their families. "You earned it," he replied. "No, we earned it," she corrected. "Together." There was silence for a while. The crickets hummed. A light breeze stirred the wind chimes. "You know," she added, "you did more than punish them. You gave them a path back. I had to." "No, Michael. You chose to." And he realized she was right. Discipline without redemption was just vengeance. But to demand better and believe better, that was leadership. A week later, a surprise awaited Michael at the next town hall. Officer Daniels walked in, clean-shaven, sober. He took a seat at the back, listened the entire time, and after the meeting, approached Mary. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it. I wasn't worthy of this badge." Mary didn't argue. She just placed her hand on his arm. "Then earn it back, not for the badge, for yourself." He nodded, eyes wet. The community, once fractured, began to mend. Not because they forgot what happened, but because they saw what came after. Accountability, compassion, growth. And in that growth, something rare took root. Trust. Not blind, not perfect, but hard-earned and deeply needed. On the anniversary of the incident, the town held a quiet vigil, not for scandal, but for grace. Mary lit the first candle, Michael the second, then others followed. And as the soft glow filled the square, Mary whispered to her son, This is what justice looks like, when it listens, when it learns." Michael nodded, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel peace. The sun hung lazily in the afternoon sky, casting golden streaks of light across the quiet town. It was one of those days where nothing seemed urgent, where time felt stretched and heavy, and everyone moved with the ease of routine. Outside the Yasiai small-town police station, a group of uniformed officers lounged on a long wooden bench, sipping from paper coffee cups and laughing over stories from the beat. Officer Daniels, the loudest of the bunch, leaned back, gesturing wildly as he recounted a story involving a runaway goat and a very irate grocer. Laughter burst from the group, carefree and full-throated. It wasn't derisive, just the easy camaraderie of people who spent too many hours under fluorescent lights, chasing small dramas. None of them noticed the old woman at first. Mary was barely more than a shadow passing along the sidewalk, her pace painstakingly slow. Her thin frame leaned heavily on a wooden cane, which clicked softly against the pavement with each step. She wore a faded coat 2 sizes too big, buttoned to the top despite the warmth. Her hands trembled as they gripped the handle, knuckles pale with effort. She had made this trip many times before, to the corner store, to the post office, sometimes just to walk. It wasn't about the destination anymore. It was about dignity. About doing what she still could, even if it took everything she had. Her foot caught the edge of the curb. It happened in an instant. A stumble, the cane skittering from her grasp, her body tilting, gravity unforgiving. She crumpled to the sidewalk with a soft thud. The breath escaped her lips in a quiet, involuntary moan. Pain shot through her hip and elbow, and embarrassment bloomed hotter than either. For a moment, there was silence, then laughter. Loud, careless laughter. The officers had seen it. Some instinct, immature, cruel, or simply numb, kicked in. Phones were drawn. One began filming. Officer Daniels let out a guffaw. "Did you see that tumble? Jesus, she folded like a lawn chair." None of them moved to help. Mary, her pride shattered more than her bones, lay still. Her eyes flicked upward, catching their faces. Not one showed concern. Just mirth. Just detachment. As if her pain was entertainment. From the street, a car engine cut sharply. The sound of a door slamming. Footsteps. Purposeful. Heavy. "Captain." Michael Monroe crossed the distance in seconds. He hadn't seen the fall, only the aftermath. His officers jeering, an elderly woman sprawled on the ground. His heart surged with alarm. He rushed to her side, kneeling. "Ma'am, are you all right? Can you hear me?" Mary turned her head slightly. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Michael's breath caught. "Mom?" Silence. Then a stunned murmur rippled through the bench. Mary nodded slowly, pain etched in every movement. I'm okay, Michael. Just clumsy, I guess." But her voice trembled, not from the fall, from humiliation. Michael stood slowly, his face hardened. He turned to his officers. "You saw her fall? And you laughed?" No one answered. Eyes darted. Coffee. Cups were lowered. "That woman is my mother," he said, voice low but shaking with fury. "And even if she weren't, how dare you?" The officers shifted uncomfortably. Someone mumbled, "We didn't know." "That makes it worse," Michael snapped. "You saw a human being fall and thought it was funny." Silence fell again. He looked at each of them in turn. The weight of his stare made them flinch. You're supposed to protect people, not humiliate them. Mary sat up with his help, wincing. Michael gently guided her to a bench away from the others, then turned back. You're all suspended. Effective immediately. Mouths opened. Protests started. He raised a hand. Save it. I can't. Work with people who forget their humanity. As he spoke, a storm brewed beneath his calm. The realization that the badge could mean nothing if the person behind it lacked empathy. That respect, both given and received, could vanish in a moment of cruelty. Mary looked at him with something close to sorrow, and pride, and a quiet ache that maybe justice always comes with a price. The police station, once buzzing with offhand jokes and lazy afternoons, had turned somber. The bench out front was empty now. Inside, a meeting was convened. Unexpected, urgent. Captain Michael Monroe stood at the front of the room, hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of tension. The officers sat stiffly. The air felt dense, with unspoken guilt. I want to be clear, Michael began, his voice even. This isn't about me. This isn't about my mother. This is about the core of who we are, who we're supposed to be. A long pause followed. He let the silence work. Some of you have asked if I would have reacted differently if it were another woman, not my mom. The answer is I should not, I must not, and neither should any of you. He turned to the whiteboard behind him and, with a marker, wrote one word, integrity. It doesn't mean anything when it's easy, he continued. It matters when it's hard, when no one's watching, or when everyone is. Officer Daniels squirmed in his chair. His face was red, his jaw tight. I made a mistake, he muttered. Michael fixed him with a stare. You all did. He stepped closer. But I also know this. People are not defined by a single moment unless they let themselves be. You have a chance, maybe your last, to learn something from this. Silence. Then, slowly, one by one, heads nodded. Later that evening, Michael sat alone in his office. A file lay open on his desk, but he wasn't reading it. His eyes were on a photo pinned to the corkboard, himself as a boy, barely 5, sitting on Mary's lap. Her smile in the photo was weary but fierce. She had worked 2 jobs to put him through school. Had skipped meals so he wouldn't. He remembered her hands, how they would bandage his knees, fix torn buttons, hold his face when he cried. And now those same hands had scraped the sidewalk while men who wore his uniform laughed. A knock at the door. He looked up. It was Mary. She entered with a quiet strength, cane in hand, eyes soft but searching. You didn't have to do all that, Michael. I did. They're young, foolish, but maybe not beyond saving.